Well, welcome to Black Men Speak, a podcast that highlights ordinary black men doing extraordinary things. I am your host, Keith Dent. On it's great to be here on this February. Yeah, we miss Valentine's Day was just a couple of days ago. We had the Super Bowl, which hey, hey, it wasn't. I guess if you're an Eagles fan, it was great. But today we're going to talk about something that's very important. I have kids, that are older now, so I don't worry about this so much. But kid with parents with kids in like fourth grade, fifth grade, and younger, reading and literacy is very, very important. But on February 11th, the National Public Radio featured a story that highlighted on average our U.S. students or students in the U.S. are half a grade behind in reading and math. In particular, fourth graders continue to lose ground in 2024, with reading scores slightly lower on average than they were in 2022, and then much lower than they were in 2019. In 2019, 35% of fourth graders scored at or above the test reading proficiency standards. That figure dropped to 33% in 2022, and now it's 31% in 2024. So, so what is that? What does one do to help our students? Do you keep pouring in money into programs? Congress spent about $190 billion in our schools after COVID. Or, do we read to our kids more, find books where our kids are interested in, and try to get them to reduce their screen time? This is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this brother on today, because he actually, he tried to tackle this issue head on. He's from Columbus, Ohio. He's not a stranger to the show. His name is Damon Mosley. Now, walking around Target a couple of years ago, he wanted to tackle the issue of literacy head on, and he came up with this, which I can't wait to hear, came up with this idea to write a story called SoleMates. And, what's special about it is that he actually went on a crusade to get the store Target to actually feature the book. And, I love to hear, I can't wait to hear about, what that process was like, how long did it take for that to happen? And then what was the actual result of going around and trying to, feature this book to kids, because it was a children's book. So Damon he's Columbus-based writer, producer, and filmmaker, and he was previously a guest on, based on a book that he wrote called Smile for We, which was a photo kind of, I guess, book capturing and celebrating the positivity of Black men. So, Damon, welcome to the show, brother. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you, man. I'm happy to be here, and I love what you're doing with this platform.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm glad that I'm here, and I'm glad that you're here too. And you still got that great smile going on. So, tell me about SoleMates and how did the book actually come about?
Sure. Well, I'm a big sneakerhead. Like growing up, I've always loved to collect sneakers, and a lot of kids are into sneakers as well. So I was like, okay, in the children's book space, first off, I wanted to do something to really tackle the literacy problem, both in the country, but also in my home city of Columbus, Ohio. I have a lot of teacher friends that are always voicing their frustrations with me about just how hard it is to get the kids to read. And one of the challenges that they face is that, or one of the reasons I should say, that the kids aren't interested is subject matter. There's not many books about things that they're interested in. So I said, okay, let me take my love of sneakers and the kids' interest in sneakers and come up with a story that they could easily digest and hopefully would inspire them to want to take up reading.
Okay. Um, so wasn't there a Oh, so I'm sorry. Back up a little bit because I heard you meant I got sidetracked when you talked about sneakers. So you're a big sneakerhead. So how many pairs
Yeah.
of sneakers do you own?
Oh man, I don't want to say. It's gonna you're gonna have an intervention if I tell you that. I'm probably it's not no. Here's the thing. It's not for me. It's not the volume. It's just certain. I like what I like, but I don't like buy every new release. But I probably have over the years about between 50 and 60 pair. Which that's I'm old. You know what I mean? So give
Oh
me
yeah,
some. It's
that's
not
not,
like
yeah,
I'm.
that's not too bad.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
too bad. Yeah, it's more like how much those cost because I like things that are rare and hard to find. So that's when you can get in trouble when you start going after things. That that you can't find very much. I actually bought my last Grails, like the last pair of shoes that I had on my list that I finally got them last week. They just came from France, so
Oh wow.
I think I might be done
That's
for
it.
now.
Okay. Okay. That's cool. That's cool. I'm glad. Yeah, I could never really get into that, but yeah. So you said so. Why did you focus specifically on a 6-year-old? And was that somewhat autobiographical?
Well, no, I did the 6 year old honestly because at 6 years old, I feel like between 6 and 7, kids are kind of straddling that line between innocence and pessimism, right? There's still a little bit of naivete about the world. They're still excited. They still believe in possibly Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, things like that. So I wanted, with this story being about a boy and his imaginary friends who were the shoes on his feet, that's a story that kids can imagine, right? They could still believe in that storyline and that premise. So I still wanted to leave some room for, I have a 6 year old godson and I see him and he's really wise about certain things, but then there's certain ways in which he's still very much a kid. So I think that's like a sweet spot because, another year or so, he's not going to believe in Santa Claus. He's not going to believe in the Tooth Fairy. So I wanted to leave that room for it to have that imagination still there.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I figured that was probably the reason because that is a way, where kids are, especially young men are wide-eyed and they still are
Yep.
questioning things and kind of enjoy things before things somehow take a turn. I guess probably that probably is around, I think, like fifth grade, sixth grade. You start to notice a difference in, young boys or young men, and so that's cool. I'm glad to hear that. So, I had mentioned the declining literacy rates earlier, but I know, with a book which was more of a picture book, right? Um, it wasn't like it's a novel or anything. So, I
Smile for we.
what's that?
Do you mean Smile for We? That one?
No, 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 no.
Oh
Soulmate.
yeah. Well, no, it has a story. I do feature the illustration because again, I want it to be really engaging for the kids. So I picked a certain illustration style, picked a certain layout and format, but it's not it's not like a chapter book. So
Right,
yes, it,
right,
it does kind of read more like a picture book for
right,
sure.
right. So my question was, when you traveled, featuring book, what were some of the things that you noticed or anecdotes that came out as a result of you traveling, the country or locally, with the book?
Well, I think the biggest surprise was how engaged the boys were. Because when I travel, I did usually do like a book reading, and I have like a big cardboard cutout of the main character, like a standee. So
Okay.
I come in with the visuals like right away, and even the boy students who teachers had said they were reluctant at first to read, or they were, they were the ones who were very hard to get to read. They just jumped right in and were engaged with the story, and I set aside some time at the end of the presentation for the kids to kind of write their own short story about the characters, just to kind of like get them into
Hmm.
the physical act of reading and writing. I think those two kind of go hand in hand. And just the when you see the students who hadn't been doing as well, to see them be so heavily engaged, like that was like, okay, all they really need a lot of times is just a subject matter that they can relate to. A lot of things are aimed in terms of the reading space. If you even go to the bookstores, like you go into a Target, you go into a Barnes and Noble, what have you, most of the books are aimed at girls. There's not a lot of stuff for boys, and that's a whole larger conversation about a lot of other products. But in the space of reading,
Mm.
there's just not a lot of books. Again, I take my godson to the bookstore, and he's looking for things that look like him. He's looking for boys, and black boys in particular, and there's just not a lot there. So it shows that we can approach some of this problem by just giving boys, and black boys in particular, like I said, just subjects that they can relate to. It doesn't have to be sneakers, it doesn't have to be sports, but just find what they're interested in, as opposed to just tailoring everything for for girls. And I do want to say one other thing that stood out tremendously was, went to a local school here, and I talked to the principal about setting up an event there, and I was told directly, hey, we've got this and this and this for the girls, but we don't have any programs for boys yet. We're kind of putting that on the back burner. Now, to hear an
Mm.
administrator say that to me outright was kind of shocking. She didn't say it with malice, but I don't even think it's such a normalized thing that I don't think she even realized what she was saying or how it was landing, to an outsider's ear. So that made me even double down more to like, okay, if we want this done, we're going to have to do it ourselves type thing.
Wow, that is amazing to me. Um, One, because I would think that it would be getting better. The fact that more books, or even that, or catering a little bit more to boys. But I do know that's one of the reasons why I can't remember his name. I think his name was Richard, had created in Washington kind of a center for men and boys, because he was noticing, some of the trends that were going on, as far as young men just kind of absent with
Yeah,
not academics but in life in general. So,
for sure.
but that's fascinating that would a school would not be able to have anything catered to boys.
It was shocking, quite frankly. And to be honest, this was like I kind of got, it was like a lead from a family friend. So I'm thinking that this is going to be an easy relationship to form. And like I said, she just flat out told me, like, hey, we don't really have stuff for boys. We have yoga and wellness class for the girls. And I'm thinking, and I'm waiting to hear, okay, if you don't have anything for the boys, okay, well, do you have a prospective date for when you'll be adding those types of programs? And it was just nothing. And that's when
Mm.
it really hit me that, okay, again, if we want this stuff done, we have to be intentional, and we have to kind of do the work ourselves, or start it, whether it be with the kids in your life, if people have children, if you have godchildren, or just any children that may be within your reach. You know, I have kids in the neighborhood where they come over. I've met their parents, and like, okay, we'll sit on the front porch and like we'll read stories in the summertime. I just want to
Mhm.
make sure that I get them the repetition, because the
Right.
more you do it, I think the more you'll like it. If you have subject matters um, that you gravitate towards, but then you just make it fun. It's not like always a sterile, classroom environment.
Right,
Of
of
course,
course.
we talk about reading, in the context of academics, because that's very important. But also, when you read for leisure, you're still getting that repetition in. I've always been. My mom and dad were both bookworms, so I've done so much reading outside of a classroom setting that once I came to the classroom, it was super easy, because I had done it so much at home,
Right,
in a
right.
car, riding to the store, on the bus. I'm always reading. But it's like, you're getting your reps every day, so that
Hmm.
when you go to
Yeah,
the classroom, it's second nature.
and I think it's fascinating. I didn't expect to go too deep into this, but I think it's also because we tend to focus on just specific types of reading, like,
Yeah.
because back in the day when we were talking my wife and I were talking about comic books. Now, comic books are a form of reading, but in today we don't really talk about comic books anymore, or going to the store to buy comic books. It's almost like they don't even exist. But it's a real huge genre out there, and the anime books as well, and
Yeah, anime and manga, all that
manga.
stuff.
Yeah, manga. That's what I meant to say. We just do not try to get our kids to read different types of books. And so and then to kind of make it even worse, if we don't, if young boys don't see themselves in the books, they don't gravitate to reading at all. So but that book's not for me, because what's always grabs kids are book covers. So
Yes.
if it doesn't illustrate, oh, there's me, so this book isn't about me, or that kind of thing.
100%. I'm glad you brought that up because comic books, back in my day, I'm going to date myself here, but comic strips in the newspaper,
Hmm.
like these are actually really good, sneaky tools, for
Yeah,
reading, comprehension, reading, like I said, getting the repetition of reading up because you're still reading, right? Like
right.
even if it's a comic book and if it's manga, if it's a comic strip, you're still getting the practice of reading in. And that's usually and it's fun to you. So you're excited to turn that next page to see how the story ends. And you're excited to, like, you see that cover, like you mentioned. Um, and honestly, boys are also very self-centered or self-conscious. So if you have difficulties reading, you're going to be more reluctant to read in class, because if someone points at you and says, okay, the teacher says it's your turn to read this section, you're going to just sink to the back of the class. You don't even want to even make eye contact because you don't want to participate in something where you might your your uh, your deficiencies are kind of put on blast. You know what I mean? So it's comic books, comic strips, uh, all of these things are just good practice, and it helps you be able to read more and gain the confidence to read. So when you go to school and you're in the classroom, you have more confidence, and you don't shrink off to the sidelines and just shrink yourself. And it just helps you become more present in that space.
Right. So a question I had. So you wanted to of course, have this book featured in Target
I
for,
did.
I'm sure, for your community, so they would know where they could find the book, not just trying to
Yeah.
sell it yourself, as far as
Right.
self-publishing. So what was that process like? Was it difficult getting the book in the store? What was some of the, if you had any challenges, what were some of those challenges that you had?
Honestly, it's a crowded marketplace. I think everybody, because it's a low barrier to entry than, let's say, filmmaking, which is super expensive. Writing a book and self-publishing that's a fraction of the cost of, like I said, making a film or something like that. So, just getting on their radar. I always had a strategy. Like I figured, okay, it's not necessarily a meritocracy. Like they're not. I could write the best book in the world, but if I'm not on their radar, if I'm not kicking up some dust that they recognize, I
Mm.
wouldn't even be eligible, to be affiliated with Target. So I launched a campaign on LinkedIn, hoping to attract some of their
Oh, wow. Okay.
employees and people, I'm talking from people who worked in security to the C suites. I was just adding everybody on LinkedIn, and I would do a little campaign that featured uh, the characters interacting inside of a Target store and with their dog logo. Like I did some artwork and some fun images that incorporated that stuff. And I got on somebody's radar within the corporation. And they said, hey, listen, I'm a sneakerhead myself. I love what you're doing. Would you like to jump on a Zoom to see how I can help you? Brother out of, well, I don't want to give his information out, but a good
Right.
brother, he then made some connections to me within Psy. He got me in touch with their book buyer, and she loved it. And honestly, from there, it was just going through their intake process, which, the whole process between me meeting him or me launching the campaign on LinkedIn and me meeting him and then him putting me in touch with their book buyer. That took about 6 months, I would say, maybe a little less. But then from there was like their intake process. That was the hard, because it's a global corporation,
Mhm.
so the intake process was a little, because first they try you out on the website, and if you perform well there, you can then have discussions about being in the stores physically. And that's kind of where this project is now. I'm on their website and working towards being uh, physically in the stores and on shelves.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's cool to hear, though. It's always good. It's just different methods on how you attract. Because I have people, of course, that are watching, and they always want to know how. Everything is always about how you attract customers. So
Right.
that's very cool. So one of the things, especially since you were on previously, um, have you always kind of considered yourself kind of a social activist?
It's funny. I've never considered myself that because I think having pride in your community and your culture and wanting to help out, that just comes natural. Like I think that's the most natural thing in the world. You know what I mean? I
Do
never
you, do
saw
you
it
think it?
as,
Do you really think it comes natural?
well, okay, it came natural to me.
Okay,
It
because I
came
mean,
because
a lot of our you would say, well, because a lot of our communities are kind of,
no, for sure.
yeah.
You know, I guess I didn't see what I'm doing is all that special because, you know, from an early age, my mother had me involved in the community, volunteering. I was involved in a program to help clean up litter in the neighborhood when I was like 11, from 11 to like 17, right? Then I became a counselor within that same youth program. Um, so it just, I don't know. I've been doing it for so long. And I think that, like, I don't think ideally you shouldn't have to be told to take pride in yourself. And like I said, in your community, I've always just been very proud of,
Mhm.
of our community and of
Right.
what we've contributed to the world. So, like,
But
carrying the
I-
baton for my leg of the race just always seemed like what I was supposed to do.
okay, but there's a since it comes natural, there's a lot of people out there in your community doing the same thing.
Well, no, I guess you're right about that. Like when you when you put it that way,
Yeah,
usually when I still pick up trash in my neighborhood, I'm usually the only person out there. So fair point.
yeah,
Um, but it's just, I guess it's always been my, in all seriousness, it's always been my mission to do so. You know, I feel like everybody that came before me, you know, they ran their leg of the race. I see this whole thing, our lives are like a relay race. I'm just
right.
running my leg and I want to run a good split while I'm here. Whatever time I have, I want to contribute good things to my community. I want to make us proud, both, again, the culture and in my specific neighborhood, in my, where I
Mhm.
live. I just want to make it better than how I found it. So I honestly never consider myself to be an activist, but I do a lot of work in that space.
Mhm, mhm,
Like I
okay,
said, I help out with neighborhood kids.
right.
Um, it's something that I enjoy doing it. So, that's why I do it.
And how do you choose? How do you end up choosing the causes that you decide to support? Because I think, and yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. I was going to say seems like it's every year a new thing, but I know last year you had like a couple of things going on. So how do
Yeah.
you figure out? Oh, okay, I'm going to do this. Is it something that kind of hits you, or is it something that you like plan and think about based on something you've been like researching or focusing on?
I usually start with things that hit me, things that hit close to home. Like, again, like I talked about being a sneakerhead, I'm also a bookworm. Like, I love to read. I read like constantly. So I figured, okay, supporting literacy just comes natural because it's a long-term interest of mine. Um, I think you're probably referring to. I think you were going to my band campaign where I helped raise money for a local high school to buy them new instruments. Well, again, my mother attended that high school. As a kid, I would see that band march down, the street during that had a tradition where they would march down the street, and I saw that as a kid. So when they were in need, it just felt natural, for me to take the resources that I've had, the relationships that I have, and just kind of pour back into, where I come from. That's I keep saying that it's natural, and I'm trying to find another way to say it, but it really is like it's
Well,
just
yeah.
so.
No, I mean, I know it's natural to you, but I was just
Yeah,
challenged
yeah.
that does not.
No,
It's
you're right.
not natural to a lot of folks. So it makes it that you're. I mean, that you're in rare company, and the fact that you are doing this is a great thing. So I
Thank
just
you, thank
that's
you.
what I was trying to just separate. It's like, okay, it doesn't, because we would definitely, if it was more natural, I think we would be much better off as as communities, but we're
For
not.
sure.
Yeah.
I want to make it cool too. That's the thing. I think that we can make activism cool. A lot of times, with some of the unique challenges that we face as Black people in America, a lot of times I think we get weighed down by the struggle, by the duty even of the struggle. But sometimes, like, let's let's celebrate, some of the good things. Being Black is certainly hard, but there are many things that I appreciate about it and love about it as well. So, I don't think that if you see a lot of our shows, it's a lot of like trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of slave movies, a lot, what I mean? There's a lot of like just heaviness to it. And I'm not saying that we should totally ignore that. And I don't think that the opposite of Black trauma or Black pain is necessarily Black joy. But what I do think it is, it's the freedom to experience both and find the beauty in both, right?
Mhm.
I don't want to just overcorrect and just be all happy, sunshine, roses. That's not reality, right? Like we do have some tough roads that we have to go down, but the freedom to find the beauty in both of those and to experience both of those in uh, equal amounts. That's something that I think will, we can't embrace our humanity unless we embrace the freedom to experience both sides of what it means to be alive. So yeah, I just trying to pick causes that speak to me, causes that I have some experience with, so I can be most
Mhm.
helpful.
Right. Right. Okay. Yes, and to circle back to the Love Band project. Um, I wanted you to just give me some insight on the East High. I know you spoke about, marching in
Yeah.
the streets, but what I thought was fascinating in relation to where you're located, um, because of Ohio State University, which is based in Columbus.
Yeah.
Um, why? Yeah. What's the area like, or in relation to that, and why has that? Why has the school, or in things of like playing in 20-year-old band equipment, why has that been neglected?
Ooh, now that's a tough one question as far as why it's been neglected. Let me give you some context about the school history and its significance within the Columbus community. Um, East High School is a historical school. We have a lot of noted alumni, and it was a symbol of just cultural pride and neighborhood pride here in East Columbus for many, many years. Like many parts of the country, we're undergoing rapid gentrification, which you're getting a large influx of other cultures, even more Black people who are just younger and maybe not as familiar with the tradition of this school. And there was an incident a couple years ago. Well, actually, this had been going on for a few years, but it kind of came to a head where the new residents were complaining about the band practice. The where this school is located, it is in the city, so the football field is like a mile away, like it's off site, right? Because it's surrounded by by concrete. It's a city school, so they practice like in the parking lot, and
Mm,
if you like, where else can they practice? It seems really weird to have noise complaints when you live by a school. It's almost like living next to an airport and complaining about planes landing. Like you
right.
know when you move
Yeah,
here
absolutely.
what it is, and it's a double whammy because if these kids were out hanging out on the street corners, you complain about that. When they do something productive, that they have, they can pour their talents and energies into something positive and create like a second family to some of these kids, then you complain about that. So one of the residents in particular, they were on this like I'm sure you're familiar with like the neighborhood apps, neighborhood watch apps, things like that.
Yes.
Those things can get like they can get like super racist, like at times. They can have a sense of community. If you lose your dog, stuff like that is good, but it can get really racist at times. So there was a bunch of negative chatter about the band, and then one of the residents came and confronted the band director during practice, and they were threatening to call the police and all that kind of stuff. It got really bad. So the kids, the cool thing about that is the kids were resilient. Instead of like, they could have easily said, hey, you know what, we don't want to do this anymore, this isn't worth it, this is, it's getting too contentious. They stuck together. They didn't quit. And so I saw an opportunity in that moment to bring both of those worlds together, right? The new residents and the old residents, because we both live here. Ain't nobody going nowhere. So it's like
Right.
we might as well learn to get along. So, but I know I couldn't really fight fire with fire. right? Because I would have been the angry black guy, right? So I couldn't just fire off an angry post. So I said, okay, listen, how about we invite the new residents to come see one of these, one of these parades that the school puts on. Just let you see the culture. You're in the neighborhood, you're part of the community now as well. Maybe you just don't understand what it is. So rather than lecture you or preach to you about it, just come experience it. And to their credit, and I have to give credit where credit is due, the residents responded positively. So I said, okay, now let's celebrate these kids. Let's use this goodwill, not as a feel
Mm.
good moment, but also as a do good moment. Let's go ahead and take this. Let's celebrate these kids to the tune of buying them new band instruments because, city funding isn't that great for public schools. I'm sure around the country. And everybody responded in a great way. And it was really cool to see everyone come together. And it was a true happy ending.
Wow. Yeah. I was gonna say, and did Ohio State pick up on it, or I, I just
No, no, no. So what I did was, again, I have a lot of connections just through, you know, uh, friends who've graduated and just relationships that I've made over the years. And I was able to have the drum line of East High School practice with the Ohio State drum line,
mm.
and
Oh,
that was,
so that's cool.
that was a great time. It was a great day. The kids had a great time. They got the experience and just, because our marching band is really kind of world famous. So it was cool to have them having they got to perform for the Ohio State drum line. Then they also got to participate in a full scale practice session with them. So they
Mm.
got instruction and yeah,
Okay.
it was great. It was really great.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, because that was the one thing I was wondering, because I did see a couple of the stories, the news stories, and I was wondering if how it got taken higher. Because I think the one thing is, especially if you're saying gentrification, I'm sure some of the alums from Ohio State actually live in the area. So, when those stories can be, advanced and move forward, that's when we start to see the magic, happening and things of that nature. So that's pretty cool. So I know that you've had those both projects that you launched. Do you have anything new that you think that you can share that's going to be coming up?
Well, I do have a film project that's going to be launched in the spring. I can't say a lot about it, but
Okay.
it's not autobiographical, but it's somewhat loosely based off of my life of someone who is from a neighborhood, went away to school and came back. And, again, you just want to make it better. You see all these changes happening, but how do you
Mhm.
preserve any sense of history, any sense of, your identity? For me, every time a building gets knocked down to make a condo, it's not just, debris. That place is maybe I had my first kiss, in front of that building, or maybe that was the first time I crossed the street by myself to go to the store. So each one of these buildings, to me, each one of these landmarks, when they get taken away, it's like a piece of me gets taken away. And as a black man, I feel like I'm already erased to a degree in society. So this is
Mm.
like a further, it takes you down even further. So this project is about just that arc of somebody. It's really like the hero's journey. If you're familiar with any kind of mythology or
Right,
just basic
right,
storytelling,
right,
you have the main character, you go out into the world, you gain this new knowledge or special skills and information, and you come back home and try to reapply it to make home a better place. So that's
right,
going to be the
right.
premise of that. And it's going to be really fun though. Like, again, I feel like a lot of times black art, we get weighed down with the struggle, but
Mm.
I do want to have fun. Like, I want to celebrate our, our strength, our beauty, our uniqueness. We can still have fun.
Of course, yeah. I mean, as well as we should. So I know you went to school here in New York City. So
Yeah,
did you like New York?
I did. Well, yeah, because at that time, being 18 years old in New York City, that was the time. It's kind of cliche that, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. But there's some truth to that because I feel like New York will test you. It will. It was now, mind you, I have two New York experiences. I have the New York experience as a student, where you have a meal plan, you have a dorm,
Okay.
everything's taken care of you. Like, that New York is great because you don't have any worries but
Right.
homework and
Right.
if you can pass this test or not. But coming back as a bill paying resident, that was a challenge. New York
Okay.
it's an unforgiving place to a degree. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily the most nurturing and welcoming place. So you kind of have to get in where
Mm,
you fit in, and
mhm.
you'll find out a lot about yourself. Put it that way. And I honestly can't. I think a lot of my toughness comes from my time in New York because it was hard. Parts of it were hard, and you know, it
So
tested
you,
me.
so to kind of extend, so you felt
Yeah,
and I don't want to say perils, but you felt the struggles or the obstacles of being a black man in New York, or was it just because maybe younger? I don't remember the time. I would assume it's probably around the late '90s, probably.
yeah. I was gonna say, well, I'm gonna see where you're going with this one. I'm like, oh, how far is that? He's gonna put me.
No,
Yeah, it was in the '90s. It was in the
yeah, late
'90s for
late
sure.
'90s when the recession was kind of it was kind of challenging back then because I was in around I was here or late early '90s, so I know there was some of those issues that were happening.
Okay, yeah, it was like mid to late '90s, and
Mhm.
well, for me, it wasn't so much. You know, I didn't feel it so much as a black man. Just for me, just existentially, like just trying to survive. Trying, I was working two jobs and could still
Mhm.
barely cover rent. It was just like I was watching I saw a Instagram story. I think it was Sterling K. Brown, like the famous
Okay.
actor. He was talking about just like how hard it was just to even make rent in New York. And I'm like, I remember those days. Like it's just tough. Like
Yeah, it's no
you know,
joke.
people come from New York, they come to Ohio, and they just can't believe, like, even like the apartment rental prices. They're like, what? That's all? You know what I'm saying? So it's just really, really hard to make a living in New York, let alone I couldn't even honestly focus on like the cultural stuff, just everyday survival. I felt
Mhm.
like I had to really go out and really just like take it by the horns because you could get ran over in a city of 8 million people. You
Yeah.
could really, really, like, it can just really steamroll you. So but I'm grateful for that time. Like I said, I think it taught me a toughness. It gave me a toughness that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, it's so funny. If you can make it there, I never even got that chance. I did try to get jobs in the city, but it was really tough. And I ended up working in Jersey. So, um,
If I were smart, I should have done that too.
yeah, right. Um, so I really also wanted what thought was fascinating is your how you support your community. So you didn't because you've had the different projects. You didn't really start a nonprofit to
No,
and was that by
you,
design and why did you do it that way?
a lot of people were telling me and advising me to do a nonprofit, and honestly, I won't rule that out in the future. Each project that you mentioned, from SoleMates to Smile for We in particular, like those could, well, Smile for We, let's just start with there. That
Mhm.
could easily become a nonprofit. Like that has the legs to do so. But I think my goal and my passion to try my hand at filmmaking, because I just couldn't, nonprofits, you have to have employees, you got to have,
Mhm,
there's
mhm.
just so much more to do. I respect that.
Absolutely, yeah.
I respect what that is. And I knew that I still wanted to at least try my hand at my film project. So, I'm not saying that nonprofits would be a fallback plan of any kind, but I'm saying I at least wanted to, you know, build my brand because I started these projects kind of like when COVID was at its height and everything was kind of shut down in Hollywood. There were strikes, there was all kind of stuff happening to where there was just no movement happening in that space. But I wanted to stay creative, stay active, build my brand. So I did the books, at a time when things were kind of, the country was still kind of shut is where these ideas were birthed. But I knew that once things got back up and running, I owe it to myself because I've been trying so long to get this off the
Right.
ground to start this film campaign. And so I want to try my hand at that. I'm having a ball doing so right now. But I won't rule out, because I'm going to always continue to do um, my work in the community. As a result of those projects, I've made really good relationships. So the nonprofit, if I wanted to go that route, I have an infrastructure in place to do so and the right
Okay.
people to assist with that. So I won't rule that out.
Right. But I think also just from that world that I'm in, because I'm in the nonprofit space,
Okay.
it would limit the you wouldn't be able to be as flexible
Right.
as far as doing different projects. You'd have to continue to keep
Right.
doing the
Yes.
same thing, and so it'd make it hard. And then of course, with a nonprofit, it's like a business, so they'd like, well,
Yes.
what are the things what is the main thing? It's like, oh well, I support this and I support that, but what
Right.
what does that mean? So unless, I mean, I guess it's if you were just made it Columbus based, then you could have different projects under it.
Sure.
But then he's like, well, I'm sure there's other orgs that do that same thing. So I
Right.
mean, some of the challenges, I thought it was more also by design, because it does allow for you to have flexibility and to pick a project um, that's near and dear to your heart and focus on that for a short period of time and then move on to something else. So uh,
No, you're right. You're 100% right. You have that flexibility. Being independent, almost like you. I can choose. I can pick and choose my destiny. Like as you mentioned, I've done 3 projects in the past 3 years. So every year I can be excited about this new challenge. I don't want to be. I want to spread myself so thin that I'm not effective at what I do. But I do like the independence of being able to, at this point, go where my heart leads me and pour my passion into those endeavors, like you said. Versus, I have to kind of follow a very narrow path if I do the nonprofit space. And like you also mentioned, it's very crowded here. There's a lot of nonprofits here. They're all kind of
for
like
sure.
bumping up against each other,
Hmm.
competing for limited resources and
Yeah,
attention. And I just don't. I feel like there are other people doing that, and they've had a leg up on doing that. So I try to go where my talents and skill sets are most needed and can be most effective and most unique. I feel like what
right,
I'm doing now stands out versus if I try to just be yet another nonprofit in Columbus.
right, absolutely. Cool. So before we get to the last question, where can soulmates be purchased, and where would
Sure.
someone go if they just wanted to purchase the book or get book for as a present, those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, SoleMates is you can go to Target's website. I am on their website. I know that there's, unfortunately, there's talks of a boycott, of
Right. Oh
Target right
yeah.
now.
Right.
But if
Yeah. Yeah.
and if someone didn't want to go there though, you can go on my website, which is wearesoulmates.com, WEARE soulmates.com. Here's the picture of the book here. A little bit of a glare. Let me try to step back. There you go. But
Okay.
on my website, I also have, because I want it to stand out. Again, it's a very crowded marketplace. So I don't know if you can see this. I have a little shoebox that the book comes in.
Oh wow. Okay.
You can buy that on the website, like a collector's box. I have the tissue paper. You know
And,
how when
oh,
you buy a new pair of shoes,
how many books are there in the series? Is it just one?
it's just the one. Yeah, that it
Oh,
just
okay.
came out, so I just have the one.
Okay.
My illustrator actually lives in France, and he and I were, we were talking about the challenges of, the overcoming the language barrier and the cultural differences. But he's ready. He's ready when I am. If I want to turn this into a series, if I want to do, so I had to hire him to do more artwork. He's ready if opportunity presents itself, and I think it will.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, that's cool. And I'll make sure it's when the podcast comes out, I'll make sure to put the link on there.
Thank you.
So someone's asking what the stream title even means. So the titles of what does a soulmate have to do with literacy, because soulmates is the name of the title of the book, and literacy because it's basic. The book is trying to tackle literacy by working with young people that's having a problem.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm so this may help, and I apologize for having left this part out. What I did is I partnered with a nonprofit, a national nonprofit called Reading is. I'm sure right here. I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah, Riff. Reading is fundamental. Yep.
Yes, they're out of DC, and so I partnered with them to give a portion of proceeds to them because once again, I figured they already have the nonprofit thing going, And rather than just doing a book just to make money or just for my own artistic purposes, I figured partnering with one of the nation's largest nonprofits that tackle child literacy, that was the best way to go. And they've been tremendous partners. In promoting the book and letting me use their logo in my promotions. They've been or use their logo, excuse me, my promotions. So yeah, that's to answer that question. That's what
Hmm.
it has to do. This book proceeds and its aim is specific to help child literacy from the standpoint of getting kids interested in reading and then supporting a nonprofit that does that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because Riff was around when I was a kid. So
Okay.
is that still, are they still prominent in our communities?
Yeah, they're pretty big. As far as I know, they're pretty big, and they have a if they're not the largest literacy nonprofit in the country. They're up there. I want to say they're the largest, but don't quote me on that. But I know that they're up there, and they're very active. And I really, once I researched their organization and talked to some of the principals, I was like, yeah, I feel very comfortable partnering with them uh, on a marketing level, at least to to join forces and try to tackle this thing because it's just depressing some of these numbers. I just don't understand it. And I would always, one thing I always say in my live discussions is like, don't just depend on teachers. Parents, be very active in that. Like,
Hmm.
I have
Yeah.
my godson. He was literally over yesterday. He's a typical rambunctious 6 year old. He's very physical. He wants to throw football and wrestle. And I said, okay, we can do all that, but we're going to have a time where we're going to read. We got half an hour, right? We're going to
Yeah.
read. We're going to, I made sure that I was very intentional to while we did all the fun stuff that he likes to do, video games, all that stuff. I said, we got to set aside some time, even though it's the weekend, even though he has a holiday this week. Like, I think they go back to school till Wednesday, for parent teacher conference, things like that. We're still going to get that repetition in. We're going to find something. I'll let you pick the book, but you have to sit down and you have to read. So I'm not going to just rely on teachers or, we just have to make it part of our routine. I think that will go as far as just sitting back and waiting for magic to happen at school. We have to be intentional about this. We really want these numbers to go up.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. We had those dedicated times as well. I mean, and I know my not my daughter so much because she liked to read, but I know my boys they struggled with that a bit as far as, but you have to kind of make it intentional, and it has to come before the other stuff. Otherwise, it makes it even more that much harder to get your kids to get that done. So
Absolutely. And this was like an informal, like, it was a last minute babysitting thing. Like his dad had a work thing pop up. So I didn't even know, that I was going to have him that day, but I just knew like, okay, we got to get this in. You know what I'm saying? He's not
yeah,
necessarily having any troubles with reading, but I said, no, this is just part of our day. You know, like brushing your teeth. You're going to read for a certain amount of time. If you're with me, if any kids around me, we're going to do some reading.
right.
That's just something that I always incorporate into the interaction. We're not going to just throw football in the backyard.
And even with that, I think I know kids are older. Kids older now. Everyone's got screens and stuff. They just need, and it's really just being intentional. You don't just set
Yeah.
aside 30 minutes a day to read, and you can. And the great thing about it, you can actually read on your phone. So I mean, it should easily be added. I mean, if you can read the New York Times, you could read. I mean, you can read articles. Those things are quite important.
To your mention about the screens, I think reading also, and again, of course, there's a bunch of scholastic benefits, and I think there's even some benefits as far as like just being still, not having so much stimulation with the
Mm.
screens and technology. Like again, I keep bringing up my godson because he was just here, and he was saying like this makes this like I forget how he said it, but he was like I think he said it made him sleepy or something. He was like, yeah, I feel calm, because he's just
Oh,
running
okay.
around. I'm like, you just got to be still. Like, we're gonna turn the phones off. We're gonna turn the TV off. We're just gonna read and focus. But even that made him feel calm. Like he was like, this is really relaxing. Like I feel like I can take a nap. I'm like, yes, because that would be a benefit for me, so I can get some rest too. But I think it really does teach kids that because when you read, you have to be still.
Right.
You can't like be running around the house and have a book. So just that time, being able to sit down, calm down, relax, focus. pay attention. You're not have, because if you're on your phone, you're scrolling through stuff, you're playing games, you're doing so much. I think it just also helps with some behavioral stuff as far as teaching kids to just calm down and be still for a little bit, because sometimes you do have to sit down and be still, right? You can't just be bouncing around the walls all the time.
Well, it's I mean, and also it's just imaginative. You'll get fascinating stories. I mean, just I was trying to, like, last year, and I on the podcast was trying to feature more Black male writers. So there were several books I've read. There was a book I read called The Talk, which was a graphic
Yeah.
novel about a kid growing up in California and all the challenges he had to deal with because he was mixed race, dealing in California, which to me, I was kind of surprised because I'm like, oh, you just don't expect it because since California is such a melting pot and everyone's can be
Right.
so chill. But he had struggles and it was quite fascinating. And I interviewed him. But then I had read a book about a gentleman that had been on death row out in San Quentin for like 40 plus years. It's called The Bird Has My Wings. And so you're not going to hear about these stories if you don't read. That's
For
just
sure.
my personal opinion. You're not going to, because you're just not going to hear about the stories. This is not a story that's going to go viral or anything of that nature. But these stories we need to know about these stories. It just expands our world vision.
100%. I think that I'm pretty sure, me being a writer is a direct result of how much I read growing up.
Mhm.
Once your imagination gets turned on to that degree, you can't really turn it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Damon, this has been fantastic. But as you know, and if I don't know if you remember, I always like to end by pouring into our guests and to get them to really think about and pull back from all the things that we do, because we're, as Black men, we usually get validation through the things that we do. And so I still always like to ask, well, as a Black man, how are you feeling right now as a Black man right in America?
Um, I gotta say, well, it's a good question, but a tough question because
Yeah.
I feel
I didn't know
I
if you
feel
remembered or
that
not, but yes.
I hadn't until you started when you started that sentence. I'm like, I forgot about this part. I feel excited about personally. I feel excited about the projects that I have coming down the pike. Film project, super excited about that. But as a Black man, I feel a little. I feel some anxiety around just our erasure. Um, I'm not necessarily liking what I'm hearing from all this gender divide talk that's going around. That's everywhere. Like we're so besieged from inside and out as Black men. Like I see us getting erased. If you go to these stores, and I challenge anyone who's either listening, yourself included, go to the stores and look on the shelves. You won't even see us on packages. If you do see a Black person, it would be a Black woman or a Black, little girl. Like I don't know what happened to make us just personas non gratas in society, but that's a little
Mm,
disheartening to every day see us getting further and further pushed to the margins. I don't like it, you know. And one of the ways in which the reason why I do so much in my community is kind of like self therapy. You know, I can't get that recognition or get that exposure in society at large, so I just make it for myself. I'm
mm,
not waiting to be. I'm not waiting for the roll call, right? I'm just going to show up. So that's kind of like I think the foundation. My foundation is built on service, and I'm not waiting for someone to appoint me or to recognize uh, me as a human. I'm going to just take it. You know what I'm saying? So
mhm,
I would like to see. I think Black men should lean on each other more.
I
Like we mentioned with the current political climate, there's not going to be a lot of more. It's not. There's no cavalry coming over the hill to save us. We are our brother's keepers, but we're going to have to really do that now. I know it's a cute saying, but I think given this new day that we're in, we're going to have to really show up for each other and not just talk it. We're going to have to really do it.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I do have a lot of younger people that kind of are probably watching right now, and they may not necessarily think about it. So what are some of the things that they should be doing to be a keeper for their generation?
Honestly, it's real simple and real easy. Call your friends, ask them how they're doing. You know how you just asked me how I'm feeling? That's probably the first time I've heard that
Since the
outside of
last
my
time I
wife.
asked you?
Exactly. Like
Since the last
seriously,
time I asked you?
like you said, no, we're so busy doing stuff because we get measured by how much, not just if we contribute, but how much we contribute. Like the amount of respect that we get, even from within our community, is based on how much we do and who we do it for. Now that can make you feel just like a beast of burden, like that doesn't make me feel like a person. That makes you feel like an ATM or an Uber driver, or people always, they what can they get from us? What do we do for them? And if we do enough, then we'll get a little bit of respect or we'll get a little bit of love. Like, no, call your guys, check on them. Uh, because I've gone to school all over the country. I have friends from LA, DC, Miami. You know, what we do a lot of times, we'll have a Zoom. Like my college roommate and I, we're really close. He lives in LA. We like, what, man, it's been too long. It's been too long since we've, talked or since we've, hollered at each other. So we'll set aside 10 minutes a week, not to call. We need to see each other. We can't work across the country. So just check in on your people, ask them how they're doing. Don't ask them for something, right? "Hey, I got this new business." No, just call and see how they're doing. Just check on each other. That would go a long way, keeping your people close to you. It's not super hard. It doesn't sound like much, but it goes a long way towards, because like I said, you just asking me how I'm thinking like, man, like that's why you saw me fumble with the answer, because it's almost like I didn't know how to even respond to that because no one asked me that
Right,
outside of my wife.
right. Well, I challenge you to ask your friend out in LA. How's he doing?
Okay,
So,
for sure.
yeah. So, Damon, thank you for being on again. I really appreciate it. Especially just not just for what you're doing, but just how you're doing it. You found projects that were dear to your heart, and you just decided to do something about it. Not necessarily, I mean, for financial gain, but you saw I guess, a social gain for the people that were around you and for the city of Columbus. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Can't
So,
wait to come back.
yep, absolutely. I can't wait to hear your project. And as soon as it's ready to go, just let me know. You know where to find me.
Oh, I will do.
Okay. Um, Thank you. This is Keith Dent from the Black Man Speak podcast. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and we look forward to you joining soon again and hearing more about all the stuff that we're going just to highlight ordinary Black men doing extraordinary things. Peace.